So, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for attending the Mountain View Public Library's online event this evening, the Top 10 Habits of Successful Gardeners. My name is Charles Mosner, and I'm a librarian here with the City of Mountain View. And before we begin, I'd like to give a big thanks to the UC Master Gardeners program of Santa Clara County for making today's program possible. I also wanted to take a quick moment to mention that our Master Gardener program next month will be an in-person program on growing winter vegetables and herbs in containers. That will be happening on Saturday, September 13th at 11 a.m. So we hope to see you at the library's first floor program room for that. And in addition, I wanted to mention that we're also going to be hosting a plant exchange once again at the Mountain View Public Library on Saturday, August 30th from 2 to 4 in the garage around the side of the library off of Mercy Street. You're welcome to bring a plant, and all types of plants are welcome. Seedlings, cuttings, house plants, plants in containers, even shrubs and small trees. You don't even have to bring a plant in order to take a plant. And again, that plant exchange will be happening on August 30th, Saturday from 2 to 4. And I'll put a link to that in the chat later. All right, well, without further ado, I'll turn things over to our speaker this evening, UC Master Gardener Mint Pasakdee.
All right, thank you, Charles. Let me share my screen and we can start. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me. So I go by Mint. My name is Pasakdee. So I have been volunteer for the UC Master Gardener Santa Clara County for the past almost 10 years now. So tonight topic would be about, the top 10 habits of successful gardener. We welcome gardeners out there, from, beginner, advanced, and everyone. So then, again, feel free to put on the question. It's nice to learn from one another. And I will share with you that if we end up have a lot of questions and I cannot get to them all, we do have a service that you may ask question anytime, from your own cell phone and computer. For those of you that new to our, so this is the slide that, explain about the next month speaker. So that will be one of our master gardener, Martha Carpenter. So that will be in person, so then you can attend this, the next month gardening talk in person at Mountain View Library. So for those of you that never heard about our program before, we are part of the certified volunteer, which means that we train to become a volunteer. So, we are always welcome new volunteers. We only train the new volunteers every 2 years. Just in general, there are a number of people that might not get accepted to be volunteers for the first time. Please don't be discouraged. We do train you everything, pretty much it's a weekly class for 1 semester. So you will learn from expert, and then you will be able to go out there. If you're not comfortable to be a speaker, which should be fine. We do different events like outreach. We work with school garden teacher. You can be advisor. We do all kind of things. So just so you know that it's all right. I just happen to be a teacher, so I work for Santa Clara Unified School District. So I am comfortable to teach gardening class as a volunteer hours. We do have different programs, just like how I list here. The best way to find out about us, you may Google Master Gardener Santa Clara County, and then it will pop up that website, or you can go to the link out here. And we have 2 big events, which is the plant sale. So we do sell seedling, transplant, bulb like garlic, onion, etc. So we do that twice a year, and it's a big event because you can get all kind of heirloom variety. Often we do have a free seed giveaway or different activities during that day. So the next one that coming up will be in October. So Saturday, October 11 from 9 to 2, and the location is South San Jose. So that's our main greenhouse facility. So we do open weekends for the public viewing. You can go to the website and check the hours, but usually we open Saturday morning, but the sale will be only in the fall and spring. So, at that time you will be able to purchase cool season crop, native plant, flowers, succulent, etc. So that would be the sale that coming up. So for today, just in general, I will highlight pretty much what will it take for you to become an avid gardeners, right? So where should we start? And then I'm just listing here that's kind of in general that we recommend that this will be a 10 habits that the gardener should have, to have those bountiful gardens. So first, feed the soil. Second, get to know how plants grow. Third, embrace failure. Fourth, shop carefully. Fifth, right plant, right place, and right time. Six, irrigate intentionally. Seven, control garden pests. And never let weed go to seed. So that's very important, for weed control perspective. And then number 9, attract beneficial insects. So I will point out a couple of them that important in your garden. And then again, the more you spend time in your garden, you get to know what's going on. The more you gardening, you be a better gardener for sure. So then at the end, we just summarize what we learned today. So like I said, to start with, for those of you that either new to our location, moving here from different country, or just one of these days you just want to garden and you don't know what to start, the best way to start is actually go visit those gardens out there. We do have a few places in this area that, part of Santa Clara County demonstration gardens, so the website is also linked from the main website. So this is kind of the location. So we have one that near you guys, north from Mountain View is Palo Alto, and then a couple in Sunnyvale, Cupertino. So those places, they have hours that you can visit during the weekend. They have like master gardener volunteer that, pretty much show you around and answer questions. So take time to, go visit those demonstration garden. So to start with, right, so we have heard about the term feed the soil to get healthy plants. So what are the healthy soil for life? So this is kind of the definition that pretty much listed by U.S. Department of Agriculture. So quote unquote soil health, also referred to as soil quality, is defined as the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. These definitions speak to the importance of managing soil so they can be sustainable for the future generation. To do this, we need to remember that soil contains living organisms that, when provide the basic necessity of life, food, shelter, and water, perform function required to produce food and fiber. So just to summarize, right? So if you happen to be a lucky gardener out there, that if you dig in on your backyard or work on your garden bed and you happen to notice this earthworm just randomly. So earthworm is a very good sign to show that, you have a living soil, or the soil that, can provide a good source of nutrient for your plant. So that's why, they are part of this soil food web. So you can see that earthworm is sort of the center of it. A lot of those microorganisms is hard to see with naked eye, but in general, when you have the soil that, has earthworm, it contains those beneficial fungi, bacteria, and there are different kind of like those pretty much like good microbes. There are some bad microbes that can kill your plants as well. So we are gonna sort of learn about how to maintain those good microbes to, to stay in your soil, and then you have a healthy plant. So there are simple way to like pretty much, evaluate your soil, right? So you don't need any fancy tools. You may just pretty much, get a handful of soil and then make it wet. So if you has that, you notice that earthy smell or foresty smell, just like when you go hiking in the forest, or that smell that similar to like, the first, first rain after all this dry season, that unique smell. So that's the smell that caused by the soil bacteria. So it's a good sign that, your soil has like contain those good bacteria. It's okay if they're lack of smell. So we just have to do some work to make them become, like increased biological activities. The color of the soil also related. So the high organic matter or the soil that contain more activity of microbes, tend to have a darker color. And again, you may add, or increase organic matter. So that pretty much from adding compost, adding mulch, adding organic fertilizer, etc. And then it's good to know, like, feel it, that what type of texture of your soil. So mainly it could be a mix between sand, silt, and clay. So for our area, Santa Clara Valley, we have a high clay content, which is not so bad from the science perspective, because clay would sustain a lot of nutrient. That's why we used to be a valley of, beautiful orchard and field crop, again. But clay, when it get hard and if it doesn't maintain properly, it will be hard to work with. So that's why you need to add organic matter or compost, or mulch to make the clay, to soil to get more fluffier and easier to work with. So just in general, like when you look at soil as a whole, right? So half of the soil is actually air and water. So you can see the arrow here. And then 45% is mineral, which is like, sand, silt, clay, and 5% is organic matter. So I do highlight here that, the organic matter is something that we can manage or we can add to the soil to make your soil become healthier. As a gardener, often we have those two type of gardener, that the one that would love to water so much that, you have this water that keep adding to the soil structure or soil composition, that the air space is disappear, right? So plant need water. However, if you have the plant that stay wet the whole time and the root doesn't get to breathe, the plant can suffering and get root rot and, die eventually, so that's kind of the extreme case. And we have another group of gardeners that, try to be like, not water too much, but if the plant end up wilt, eventually it might not come back, it might die. So you just have to learn about what type of plant you grow and, how much water they need. So stay sort of in the middle. It will be better with, for the watering part. So then this is kind of the related to adding organic matter back to the soil, right? So we call soil amendment or soil conditioning. So just like I said, the Santa Clara Valley native soil has a tendency to have a high clay content. So in order to make the soil more fluffy and aerate the soil, you need to add some type of amendment. So the first one is compost, so you want to make sure that it's a compost that, when you went to the store, right? So it would be the bag and they would just say like compost chicken manure, compost green waste, so make sure that the way they label the bag, it's a finished compost. There are a couple terms that they use. It's called aged manure. Just be very careful, because those are the manure that they scoop out from the pie that it would sit for a few years, so the material might not be like, a good mix or hasn't well finished as a, hasn't gone through like that high temperature. So often those would be cheaper. However, they do contain weed seed. So just when you think about the cattle, right, they eat grass, and if they eat like grass seed, it will stay on their poop, and that's like pretty much their manure. And you may use some of those like decomposed wood chip or a straw bale, so if you have a pile of leaf, just like this time of the year, we entering, it's this is like our summer, but eventually some of the deciduous tree will start dropping the leaf. It's actually good to save them instead of put all of them in the green bin, because if you have a pile of them, and let them naturally decompose, and you will get those good, pretty much semi-decomposing leaf that can use in your garden and help adding organic matter. So we're talking about mulch, why mulch is important. I know probably 5 years ago, you probably heard a lot about, how we actually have to really like be careful with how much you turn on your irrigation water, because we went to a drought period. Even though we not in officially drought, it's good to save water. So then we have this like precious water resource to use in the long term. So using mulch in your garden is very important because they help, of course, they not only help suppress weed, right? So they help moderate soil temperature. So then they keep the plant root cool and moist, and it help with the conserving water. So you when you look at, and even like, if you have slope or the area that has a tendency to prone to like soil erosion, keeping mulch in the area would help reduce soil erosion. So I mentioned organic and inorganic, and I will show you there's a different variety out there. But often, like for the garden bed, for example, this picture is from one of my garden bed long time ago. I use like coconut foil type material, so they absorb more moisture, so that you don't have to water that often. So then that's like you save water that way. And then for those of you that has a tree or shrub in your landscape, I want to point out this is very important point. So we have this the picture that say bed here, right? So like if you put mulch under the tree or shrub or perennial plants, when you have mulch that touching the stem of the plant, that can create some type of like we call like stem rot or trunk. It can be like root rot, like because the mulch does create higher microbial activity. So you just have to be very careful because they do help with the water conservation. But if you have too much next to the trunk, so it's better to make sure that you have this visible root flare that the mulch is stay away. So if we recommend at least 4 to 10 inch away from the trunk or the stem, so then you won't create any or introduce any plant disease to the tree or the shrub. So for those of you, this is kind of the variety out there, you can use anything. And they have like a couple of things to keep in mind. If you have pine needles or oak tree, those dropping leaf and pine needles, they actually have a tendency to take a long time to decompose. So just be mindful that, if you have it on your garden bed that you grow lettuce or spinach, it will become like cumbersome in your bed. It's better to keep it on more like on the landscape side, like tree and shrub. There are like a lot of beautiful rocks out there. Just to remind you that rock does retain heat. So if you have rock as a part of your mulch, in your landscape, that area, unless it's like, cactus or, those plants that love heat, it will actually suffering some plant. Just be very careful with that. So pretty much, like just in general, right? So like when you have a healthy plants, you will have we will be happy, right? So we are a happy gardener when we have those healthy plants, these are the plant actually from my own garden back during pandemic. I feel like that's the year that I had a lot of time and, we spend more time in our garden and our plants are happier. When we get busy, sometimes our plants are not super happy. So that's kind of the case, but it's okay, right? I mean, at the end, you enjoy your, those crops that you grow in your garden. So now I'm gonna go to kind of the next part of like sort of science behind gardening. This would be your back to school, middle school, high school science back then. With the photosynthesis. So just in general, right? Like a lot of us, we have like happy plant tomato. They survive. They have this nice and green fruit, but it does just those green fruits hasn't turned color just yet. And you may notice that we just happen to have pretty sort of mild summer time this year. Finally this past week or two that the heat start picking up. So like even my own tomato plant, the fruits start ripening now. Like, we did plant a little bit late this year because we were traveling early summer, but again, we were surprised that when it came back and they're still green. But So they do require, for summer crop, we call heat unit. So like those like pepper, eggplant, tomato, they prefer warmer night. So when we still have like cool night in this area, which is like we just have this influence of like marine layer. That's why it takes longer for them to grow, So which means that you have to think about like where they at, the location in your on your backyard. They prefer to have at least 6 to 10 hours of direct sunlight. So make sure that you grow them, where it's not like doesn't get the shade from like the big trees or the fence, etc. So that's why it's important to know about your plant, Unlike coming up in a couple months, right? So like if you are planning to grow, even though it's still hot, but you can still start growing some or think about we call cool season crop. Okay, so this is pretty much the time of the year, so just back up a little bit, sorry. I just went ahead of myself, but this is kind of the chart that we call Santa Clara County vegetable planting chart. You may scan the QR code, but everything is linked under our website. I'm going to spend some time here just to show you how to read this chart. So like, so this chart is sort of, a group of master gardener, get together, we look at the weather, the climate, and then, a lot of us grow food pretty much from Palo Alto down to Gilroy. So we recommend that what time of the year, you should go plant from seedling or you should direct seed. So for example, it starts from A to C. So we can start with, now we're in August, mid-August, September. Let's say that I'm just going to start with the first one is artichoke, right? So this one of those plants that is pretty easier to get transplant, and when you grow them, they will become like big. But again, it will take some time to get those flowers. So if you just happen to have seed, it will take much longer. That's why it doesn't list here. But however, like arugula, for example, beans, so pretty much like arugula, this is the time. So they're one of those that they don't like the heat. So like in August, you may direct seed arugula, which is right now, and you can do that for the next few months. But if you happen to have no time, you just happen to like go to one of those like nursery or hardware store and saw arugula transplant, make sure that you plant them during September, October, because if you plant it late, it's okay to plant it, but they might not be, growing like rigorously, or they might start flowering. Another tip, especially like arugula, basil, if you start seeing the flowers, which is probably happening right now on a lot of your basil plant, just tip them out, cut them. So then every time those we call annual plant, when they flower, they will start setting the seed. So the leaf will get smaller and you will not get those like big, nice leaf like a few months ago. So if you want the plant to actually grow bigger leaf, make sure you chop that flowers or the seed head out, and they will probably grow for a few more months until we have the frost. So this would be, let's see. So for August, you may direct seed beets, that's a good one to do. You can do that this month and next month, and then you may transplant beets for the next couple months. And you can tell that, by December and January, we get pretty cold and wet here. A lot of plant, it's not a good time to plant anything. So make sure that you plan to like get your gardening activity going and then take a break, like, December, January. And we have like bok choy, broccoli, which is like we call cool season crop, even though you may plant broccoli from seed, but if you want to start from seed, you need to start it pretty much last month. But here, they don't list it, but it's better to grow broccoli from transplant. And you will get, the floret or the flower that we eat, much faster. And they will have, pretty much say it here that how many weeks it will take, etc. So then for those of you, right, so you often, you go shopping and you see all this seed package. Make sure you read both front and back. So often, like, for example, Renee Garden, we're not supporting one business, but just FYI, they just happen to be California-based seed company. So often their seed, are adapt to California climate, I mean, it's okay if you happen to buy seed from somewhere else, and often if you buy things from Amazon, you might not be able to tell where it's come from until you receive it. So make sure you read the seed packet carefully. And then again, make sure you use that list as a reference when to plant seed, or maybe you can, if you like one of those that you want to start anything from seed and, have it in your mini greenhouse before you transplant outside, make sure that you look at time of the year and, temperature, etc. And then again, there are a few report out there. So this one came from the Old Farmer's Almanac, so they're one of those publications that they report that, there are companion planting. So if you grow basil, it's good to grow with like tomatoes. So if you have limited space, right, you can have basil, tomato, lettuce. It's still too hot for lettuce, but you can start planting small lettuce, but pretty much summer, the lettuce in this area will not, it's too hot for us. And then bell pepper, for example, and then rosemary would be carrot, lavender, garlic. So that's kind of, the way that you don't have to, but they will report that if you grow them together, you get a higher production, for example. And then when you grow a plant, it's good to actually be aware that what type of, or how deep of that plant, with the root, we call either root ball or the depth of the root. So for example, right, the shallow root type would be those like onion, radish, celery, spinach, and lettuce. And then deeper root can be like the bigger plant too, right? Broccoli, Brussels sprout, potato. And those that actually, just like my nickname Mint, right? So that's one of those that we highly recommend that you grow them in container or some type of contained space, because they will become weedy and it will take forever to get rid of them because they love this our climate. So they do, even though the plant is small, but the root can go deep. Excuse me. And then there's a group of medium root system, like they go up to 3 feet, and then the one that has a deeper root like corn, eggplant. So those pretty much just the list out there that you can find out, but it's good to find out. So then let's say, for example, if you grow things in container, you want to make sure that you don't grow those deep root in small container because it's not going to be productive. So this is kind of the date that just to keep in mind, right? It's varied from year to year, just how like, so I've been living in this area. I used to live in Central Valley and it's like very hot and dry, right? But you can grow a lot of summer crop there that very like you get tons of eggplant, tons of tomatoes because it's hot there. But here for our area, we have a mild frost. Some year we don't even have frost, but the frost can start from as early as November 15, and the last one can even last until March 15. Or some year, this is a picture from the we call teaching garden, which is part of Santa Clara adult ed. If you take a class from them, you get a plot there. So I do teach there from time to time. So then, that must be like April 1st, I believe, a few years back, we still, they got that frost that you can see the ice things there on top of the mulch leaf, So if you don't have mulch, the plant will be suffering. And there was some creative way that my student used to like protect plant from frost damage, right? So you can use those plastic, the 2-liter bottle, cut half, and you can make it like mini greenhouse. And then you can use that type of frost roll cover. So just, keep that in mind that like if we have frost advisory, you need to come out and protect the plant. It can be as easy as like old sheet that you put on top of your plant. So next part, with plant, right? Just like us, we need to take supplemental nutrition from time to time. Plant in general, they have the basic nutrient that they get free from the air and water, which is like carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The macronutrients are the one that, we can supplement to them, we call NPK or nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So just so you know that every time you go buy a bag of fertilizer, regardless that is organic fertilizer or synthetic fertilizer, those 3 numbers, the first number is always nitrogen, second is phosphorus, and third one is potassium. And often, the chemical fertilizer, they only would give you like maybe like 1500 because that's like nitrogen fertilizer, doesn't have anything else. But if you buy organic fertilizer, that would be like 211, a smaller number, but it provide all NPK, for example. And then, like the secondary one would be the one that, for example, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, and then there are other micronutrients out there. So this is the one that I want to highlight. So, you're probably aware that nitrogen, we affiliate them with the green color. So nitrogen does support, the green part of the plant, right? Which is like is needed because green pigment is part of photosynthesis reaction. So for example, if you grow a plant that eat leaf, you probably need to focus on, adding more nitrogen-based fertilizer or adding more, for example, so, like spinach, collard green, or even broccoli, because broccoli, even though like we eat flower, right? But the flower is part of the green plant. And then next, so potassium, they call it the flower inducer or the fruit maker. So if you grow any type of fruit trees at home and you notice that your fruit tend to be smaller, you probably need to check that, like maybe you need to add some type of potassium fertilizer. For lemon, like this picture is more like for citrus, you don't have to worry too much because we call self-thinning, which means that the tree will drop the fruit if they don't, let's say that if it's like 5 feet tall, they can have 100 fruit, so they're not going, you don't have to worry about removing smaller fruit, etc. But just be mindful that when you grow stone fruit, it's tempting to keep all the fruit, right? I have a few friends that I have a hard time convincing them. Excuse me. Because you just want to keep all those fruit and eat them all. But then you get the heavier branch, and if your tree are still small, that branch will rip and you actually lose all that branch, So the recommendation is you thin the fruit to have about 4 to 6 inch spacing. So you get bigger fruit and you have a healthy tree, especially the young tree. So just keep that in mind, that it's tempting to keep them all, but it's better to not, to have a long-term bigger growth for the trees. And then last but not least, the macronutrient is phosphorus. So they are the one that, make sure that the plant root grow properly, they help with the flowering part of the plant, etc. And then this is just a quick note about soil pH, so in general, like if you maintain the organic matter in the soil, the pH will stay on the neutral side, which is a good thing because that's what we want. The native soil have a tendency to stay on like, higher, which is like 7.5 to 8. So that's like California native soil. So in order to bring the soil pH down, you need to keep adding organic matter, which means that mulching, adding compost for a long term. So then, the soil will become more healthier and provide more nutrient. So there are 2 main type of fertilizer. Like I mentioned a lot, like earlier, that we have the chemical based or the synthetic one, often they are lawn fertilizer or the one that we call Miracle Grow. So just be mindful that those actually, they are okay to use, but they actually have when you look at the label, they contain salt. So if you use it for a long term, it might not be healthy for your area. So you need to alternate with compost and, use it according to label. Excuse me. So then the organic based fertilizer, is including all like manure, compost, fish powder, etc. So when you look at the label, it often has the word derived from, like, derived from chicken manure, derived from like, a lot of them came from like the fish byproducts, for example. So just to see that, in general, when you use organic fertilizer versus synthetic fertilizer, because synthetic has a higher like concentration, you do not need to use a lot per application. So when you read the label, make sure you don't use it more than the label said, because the more we call it burning the plant, because often people use the fertilizer that too much, and then the plant suffering. So then again, like often it's happened with chemical fertilizer, which is opposite from organic, that, like, because it's less concentrated and it's more bulky. So you can use a little bit more, but again, too much also not good. So when you think about when and where to fertilize, right? So you can think about to irrigate or to water, and then to fertilize is together, because every time you water, those fertilizer will get diluted and, move downward. So when you think about plant, when they're small, you don't need a lot of water or not a lot of fertilizer, but when they grow much bigger, so this is called the root ball or the root zone, right? So you have to make sure that when you water, the water go deep enough to reach those roots that under the ground. So it's hard to tell from the top, but it can be easily as like you can dig, nearby and see whether like the soil stay moist. Sometimes it stay dry on top, but it might be moist underneath already. So you don't need to water too much. Just like I said earlier, make sure that the root get to dry out or get to breathe. You don't want it to get wet the whole time, because that's when you get root rot, or, because there's like no air movement near that root zones. So for the tree, make sure that when you do mulching for trees, you do at least a couple inches of mulch, so then it would keep, and then make sure that it stay away from the tree trunk. And if you have to install the drip line, just look at the tree canopy, right? So you have it further away. And this is all the feeder root that active underneath. So just keep that in mind, that, when you turn on the water for tree, we call it deep water. You don't have to water a lot, but we call deep water, which means that when you turn it on longer. So for example, I would say, like, summer, you might need like at least 2 or 3 times a week. But if it's like when it starts raining or when the tree go dormant, you might not need to water at all, or maybe just once a week or less. Okay. So then just the idea that, like, if you put drip irrigation, right? If you have plant that you direct seed, for example, this is the bush bean. The first week, it has to stay wet just because the seed has to germinate. And then after that, you can let it go to that dry cycle that I mentioned. I don't know how many of you like come into this, have your strawberry or this time of the year, we do get a lot of, I think I didn't mention earlier, on our website, we call hotline. So you can take a picture of the question and email us. Someone will get back to you with a day or 2 or 3 days. Depends. Like, we don't work weekend. So the volunteer usually work Monday to Friday and answering question, whatever you can ask, 24/7, but they only work between, I would say, like 9 to 2 p.m. So that's when they answer the question. So for example, people would be like, oh, what happened to my tomato? It looked like something were, like got some type of disease. So this symptom we call blossom end rot. So it will happen on tomato, bell pepper, or even eggplant. It's actually the sign of calcium deficiency. And then it does relate it to irrigation, which means that either you have enough calcium, but you didn't water enough, or you might have enough water, but not enough calcium. So calcium can come from like crushed eggshell, compost is a good way to introduce more calcium to your soil. So then again, just keep in mind that it's not a disease from the insect, but it's actually from the calcium deficiency in your soil. So the next part is about, weed, right? So I mentioned earlier, don't let weed go to seed. So when you look at this little, the dandelion is one of those like good example that, the little kid love to play with it, right? But all those little ones that fly away, it will become one new dandelion plant, again, like it's up to you how you see it, right? Because if you want to keep your organic lawn, it's okay to have them. But if you use some type of fertilizer that contain herbicide, so make sure that, like those, grass clipping and things doesn't go to your garden because they contain herbicide from weed control. So just keep that in mind. So the best way to control weed is pretty much, our manual labor, or just keep mowing before they become setting the seed, right? So there's like different way to do it. You can, this is more like after the first rain, you get a lot of grass that coming up. So make sure that you cut them before the seed show up, because otherwise you will introduce more seed back to the soil. So this is more like spring plant. You might not see them now because it's get too hot and they already disappear. But all these little seed head, if you just let them be from last spring, just be, just a reminder that for the next rain and when the cool months coming up, you're going to have tons of this guy, which is we call oxalis. So they have these yellow flowers and they're very hard to get rid of, because they have this root that when you cut it, they still keep growing, but it's best not to let them set in this seed head, okay? So just hang in there and keep mowing them. So this is more like just in general, when you have the soil, right? So you have this seed that bury underground. So every time you dig the bed, those seed head would come, the seed would come back up. We call seed bank or soil seed bank. So that's why it's one of those battles that it would take forever. But again, like if you keep, the main thing is that you don't want the weed go next to your spinach or broccoli. So just make sure that those area near the plant is weed free. Put more mulch around it, and just again, like the plant will be happy, and then the weed population will go down. You just have to keep pulling them. So then another pest of concern for our area, like because we have such a nice weather, with this Mediterranean climate, the cool nights and the moist morning, those slug and snails just love it, right? So just so you know that they love to lay eggs near the rock. So if you have garden bed that has a lot of rock around it, if you lift it up, you might see a cluster of eggs. So try to don't have that near your garden bed is one thing. Or if you see them, it's a good activity with, kids to make them, they show up early morning or like pretty much, before sunset because they don't like the sunlight. So you just have to pick them out, and with hand is one thing. And then if you end up use some type of control, they are the organic option, which is the one that pet friendly, which means that you don't want the bed that, if your pet happen to be out there and eat it, your pet might get sick. So just make sure that you read label properly. So the next part, last but not least is the, about the insect, right? So there are good bugs and bad bugs out there. So I do like Google Lens, I just happen to use this app a lot. There are tons of apps, like this is a free one, but you may purchase a couple that if it work with you. But at the end, I like the Google Lens to look at it, but it will be option, but I just happen to know most of them already. So again, if you're not sure, you can take picture and email us, the master gardener will get back to you. But just so you know that a lot of us know that, the lovely ladybugs or the lady beetles, are very good for us because they do eat all the bad aphid out there. But a lot of people do not recognize them when they at larva state, So the eggs cluster is yellow, it's very small. And then this is the larva state actually eat almost double more aphid because they crawl everywhere. Because the adult state, they're flying, right? So if you see them, just don't crush them. Just remember they are going to become a ladybugs that help you in the garden, So they are the free aphid control for your garden. And another one we call lacewing. So they are carved very tiny, but then when you start spotting them, it's very cool because the eggs, it look like they're flying, it's almost like fairy, like there will be like 5 of them in a row or something. So the adult, they're flying tiny insect, but their larva state also, just like ladybugs, they do eat a lot of aphid. So they would clean the aphid out of your plant, so they would hang out in your garden. So that's why it's important that if you use some type of control, like not even like, soap or spray, it can kill the good bugs as well. So sometimes it's good to just like keep an eye on those pests. And then again, like nature has its own way, so you don't have to worry too much. And there are the list of all these like natural enemy, so if you go to our website, or if you want to Google search, we call UCIPM. So IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. So we encourage people to having a habitat for biological control. So which means that you may have to have sacrifice a few of those like mustard. So then, these good bugs can hang out, and then, the rest of your garden would be okay. So this is kind of to summarize, right? I gave you a lot of information, but again, to be, one of those successful gardener, just remember to, feed the soil, getting to know how the plants grow, and it's okay, to fail, right? So you learn from the experience, and then, when you go shopping, think about whether you want to invest on the seedling. It costs more, but it grows faster comparing to the seed. Grow a plant at the right place and the right time of the year. Look at the growing chart, and then when you water, just keep in mind that water less is actually better than water more. And then again, way to control garden pests, recognize beneficial insect, especially a lot of those like, the larvae of ladybugs and lacewing that I show you the picture. They are good bugs. And weed control can be, burden, but the best time to pull the weed is like right after the rain or right after you irrigate, so the soil will be softer and easier to pull. And again, like think about creating habitat for beneficial insect, and just spend more time in your garden. So then I wish you best of luck with your gardening experience, and we are here to support you and answer the question. So there's a question about, should we avoid dire mulch? I would say like the dye, mulch, from what I heard, they're okay. They use so first of all, you have to look at the label, if they tell you that what type of dye they use, but because it's on the safe side, maybe you can use the dye mulch, that the color mulch, on the landscape instead of on the food, because you don't want any type of color that would pretty much mix into your garden bed. I would say that, but I was told that they use a lot of soy-based color. But again, soybean in our country does have a GMO source, just so you know. So what is the best, how to best control pew bugs? And they are all over my garden bed. Those pew bugs, they come, I wonder, because you might have a lot of like decomposed organic matter. That's why they were just like loving to hang out there. Maybe let it dry out. It might help. I would be wondering what type of like, compost or mulch that you use, because they do help with the decomposing organic matter. But again, they do eat your seedling. So I would say, first of all, let it dry out, and maybe switch to different type of mulch or fertilizer, compost. And if it's not work, I just don't have the solution on top of my head. If you want to email our hotlines, or you can go to our website and just look under the pest control for pew bugs, that could help. And next question, how often and what time of the year should we fertilize in general? It's actually come down to what kind of plant you talk about. Like, so let's say that if you grow like, like spinach and lettuce, right? Their growing season is like very short. So you probably only need to fertilize one time after they become like maybe 1 inch tall, But if you grow tomatoes, eggplant, I would fertilize them like every a couple weeks. Just, but again, when they talk about fertilizer, like read the label. So let's say if you have organic fertilizer, I think often they would recommend you to do it at least every like a few weeks or every month. Just do it accordingly, But if it's a chemical fertilizer, again, don't use it too much, because a lot of these plants that produce fruit, if you add too much nitrogen, they would grow more leaf and less fruit, So so just read the label and make sure you know that what type of plant you grow, okay? So the question from Mary Jane, the class for handicapped people who need a rest garden. I know that a few of those demo garden have a rest bed, I just don't have it on top of my head. I believe our main area, the Marshall Auto Park does have like handicap accessible bed, I feel like the website would have information, or if it's, so then it doesn't waste your time for your trip. I would recommend you to email the hotline and ask them, for like specific location and time that they open, so you can visit us. So how can we provide a good seed? You mean like produce? Like let's say that let's say if you grow bean and you want to save the bean seed, I assume that's what the question means. So if you want to collect the seed or saving the seed from your plant, you have to make sure that those seeds are healthy, in a good shape. And again, if you let any plant because the seed that you collect to save for next season will not be the edible kind, okay? It has to keep growing until they reach maturity. So for example, bean would be more like get hard and, not edible anymore, but it will be the seed that you can collect. But make sure, if you were interested in the seed talk, I gave a seed talk before as well at different library. There's like not all the seed can be saved, okay? Especially like, let's say that if it's not heirloom tomato, the hybrid tomato, if you save the seed, it will become different type of tomatoes, for example. So you have to know what you're saving as well. So just keep that in mind. So there's a question about how to keep squirrels out of my yard. They eat my plant. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that, but I feel like this is like very universal problem we have around here. It's almost like you have to cage your plant, in order to prevent those squirrels to come in. They do come. I would say like you have to find a way to protect them, like I said, either build a cage or screen around it, or put somehow cover over it. That's all I can say, but they do come, especially if you happen to be like grow yummy food out in your neighborhood that they don't have anything for them, so there are service that people trap ground squirrel, if you don't want to kill them, there are like trap that you can use, you can buy from the garden store. But again, I assume that if you trap one, there'll be more, so you might not want to do that, but it's best to like build some type of screen around it, so then they don't come in. Okay, so thank you, Lisa. So this answer for school garden advisory can help you decide a garden for ADA bed, and can be found online or built online on site. So please go to Master Gardener website and look for school garden advisory, and we can talk more. Yeah, so they do like, yeah, the oak tree, the oak tree would be a house for those squirrel, like it's nice tree to have in your backyard, but unfortunately they are wildlife habitat as well. How can we get rid of bamboo? Because so bamboo is like, they're giant, right? But you can think about they're related to grass family, which means that they will keep growing. So the more you cut on top, they will keep growing because the root has to die complete. You have to get rid of the root ball or the root system. Depends how big you're talking about, because digging them out, during the winter month, when you have nice and soft soil, the more you dig them out, you will help reduce the amount of bamboo. If you have a lot, maybe you have to hire some of those labor, to come and do it, like, or even excavate it with like, the mini tractor type thing, I know the landscaper, they use it. I don't have the word. Like, how like they help and dig. You have to dig deep. So that's one thing. There are some type of chemical out there that can be helpful. I don't have it on top of my head. But again, when you use chemicals, just be mindful that if you happen to live near those drains that go to the bay, you don't want those chemicals to drain to the bay, because often they are chemicals that stay in our environment. So I would stay away from that. But again, like they are useful in terms of if you happen to cannot get rid of them. I know a friend that has it from the house that like her neighbor bamboo come to her site. So she end up get a lot of like bamboo stick for her, to stake her tomato, her bean, that's a free stake right there. So just, yeah, again, if you wondering more like in detail, please email our hotline. Maybe they have more information about bamboo. Is it okay to get bags of compost horse manure from garage rent and fill plant box for flower, rose, and fruit tree? Thanks. Yes, I was told that they have a good manure, but again, because they are horse manure, that is the edge manure. So just be mindful that can carry somehow weed seed. And if you have them, the best practice is like you apply to the bed, but don't grow anything yet. Just let it go to like, the winter season, which is like go to a few rain, and then it will settle, pretty much it will not, if it get heat up, right, it doesn't kill your plant. But if you use it for like flowers and roses, it should be okay, or even fruit tree. I would avoid using, you can use it for annual plant, like, for your spinach, broccoli, but not right away. Like if you use it, just let it settle for a couple months. But for the flowers and roses, it should be fine. The last question for tonight, as time coming up, I have raised garden bed filled with store-bought garden soil. After 5 minutes, the water just run through the soil and out of the bottom of the bed. Should the soil retain the water? I the way I understand it, I feel like maybe you are, the soil underneath, like, it's probably get very compact. So that's why it would come out from, that's why it ran out. So the potting soil or the garden soil, usually they mix with like vermiculite, perlite, and high organic matter, So just like when you water, don't water with the high pressure, just like use some type of like, dripping water, or like, water with like low pressure and slowly, because the dry soil underneath may be too dry that it still repel water. You need to let it sit for a couple of days and keep water like, every day. So then when that topsoil, top hard clay get wet, the water will eventually move downward. I can see that. So I think I understand properly, because it's a raised garden bed. I feel like you might fill up the bed for a couple inches. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining me.
Yes, thank you, Mint. On behalf of the Mountain View Public Library, I'd like to thank Mint Pasakdee for generously sharing her time and expertise with all of us today. And thank you as well for all being here with us. As a reminder, this presentation has been recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording at your leisure in a few days or in a week or so. We do hope you will join us again at another Master Gardener program in the future. Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Bye.